The cattle screamed for water. Jackson Callahan heard them through the fever, distant, desperate wrong. He tried to rise. His legs gave out. His body hit the dirt floor hard. Outside, the July sun was killing everything he'd built, and no one knew he was dying. 3 miles away, a widow was about to make a choice that would destroy her reputation and save his soul. If you want to see how one act of mercy changed 2 broken lives forever, subscribe now and follow this story to the end. Comment your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. The dust came first. Jackson Callahan felt it coating his throat before he understood what was happening. His knees had buckled somewhere between the well and the barn. Now he lay face down in Texas dirt, the July sun hammering his back like a blacksmith's iron. Get up, he told himself. The cattle need water. His arms wouldn't obey. Somewhere beyond the fence line, 100 head of longhorn bellowed their thirst. The drought had been brutal this year. Worse than '84, worse than anything the old-timers could remember. Every rancher in Dusty Creek was hurting. But Jack Callahan was hurting worse than most. He'd been running on coffee and stubbornness for 3 weeks straight. His foreman had quit when the pay ran out. His 2 remaining hands had left for better prospects up north. That left Jack alone with 100 cattle, a dried-up creek, and a fever he'd been ignoring for 4 days. The fever won. Jack's cheek pressed into hot earth. His vision blurred. Through the haze, he saw his front porch 20 feet away. Might as well have been 20 miles. Mary, he thought. I'm sorry. His wife had been dead 2 years. Their baby with her. Jack still wore his wedding ring, though he'd moved it to his right hand. Couldn't bring himself to take it off entirely. Couldn't pretend she'd never existed. The cattle screamed again. Jack closed his eyes. 3 miles east. Eleanor Sullivan guided her wagon down the main road toward the Henderson Ranch. Mrs. Henderson had ordered a new dress for the 4th of July celebration, and Ellie aimed to deliver it on time. The heat was fierce. Ellie had tied her hair back and rolled her sleeves to the elbow, propriety be damned. No one was watching anyway. The road to Henderson's place cut through empty rangeland, nothing but scrub brush and dust devils for company. She passed the Callahan ranch without stopping. Everyone in town knew Jack Callahan kept to himself. 2 years since his wife died, and he hadn't attended a single church service. Hadn't come to town except for supplies. Hadn't spoken more than 10 words to anyone who tried to reach him. Let him be. Ruth Walker had told her once. Some men grieve by going quiet. He'll come back when he's ready. But Ellie had seen his eyes once at the general store. Empty, like someone had blown out a candle and forgotten to light it again. She knew that look. She'd worn it herself after Samuel died. Ellie was past the ranch gate when she heard the cattle. She pulled the reins, stopped, listened. The sound wasn't normal. These weren't cattle calling for feeding time. This was panic, desperation. Animals pushed past their limit. Ellie looked at the Henderson dress carefully wrapped in brown paper. Mrs. Henderson was expecting her by noon. The cattle screamed again. Ellie turned the wagon around. Thud. She found him in the yard. At first she thought he was dead. He lay motionless in the dirt, one arm stretched toward the porch like he'd been crawling. His shirt was soaked through with sweat. His skin, where she could see it, was the color of brick. Ellie jumped down from the wagon. Her boots hit the ground hard. Mr. Callahan. No response. She knelt beside him, pressed her fingers to his throat. His pulse beat fast and thin like a bird's heart. His skin burned under her touch. Lord have mercy, she whispered. She tried to roll him over. He was solid heavy, unresponsive, dead weight. She got him onto his back and saw his face properly for the first time. Eyes closed, lips cracked, cheekbones sharp enough to cut paper. When was the last time you ate? She muttered. When was the last time anyone looked after you? The cattle answered with another chorus of desperate bellows. Ellie looked toward the barn, then back at the man dying in front of her, then at the sun climbing higher, getting hotter. She made her choice. First things first. She grabbed Jack under the arms and dragged him toward the porch. It took everything she had. Her muscles screamed. Her back protested. But she got him up the steps, through the door, onto the floor inside where the heat was marginally less murderous. The house was sparse, clean but unloved. A kitchen with cold ashes in the stove. A bedroom with a neatly made bed that looked like it hadn't been slept in properly for months. A woman's photograph on the mantel, dust gathering on the frame. Ellie filled a basin with water from the kitchen pump. She soaked a cloth, pressed it to Jack's forehead. His eyes flickered, but didn't open. "You stay here," she said, knowing he couldn't hear her. "I'll be back." She ran for the barn. The cattle were in bad shape, ribs showing, eyes wild. The water trough was bone dry, covered in dust. Ellie found the well behind the barn, cranked the handle until her shoulders ached, filled bucket after bucket. The animals drank like they'd never seen water before. It took her an hour to get them all settled. By the time she finished, her dress was soaked through. Her hair had come loose and her arms felt like they might fall off. She didn't stop. Back in the house, Jack had shifted slightly. His head had turned toward the door. His lips were moving, forming words she couldn't hear. Ellie knelt beside him again. "Mr. Callahan, can you hear me?" His eyes opened, confused, fever bright. "Mary, I'm Eleanor Sullivan, from town." She kept her voice steady. "You collapsed in your yard. I found you." His brow furrowed. He tried to sit up. The effort cost him everything he had, and he fell back with a groan. "The cattle are watered." Ellie pressed him down gently. "They're fine. You're not. Can't." His voice was sandpaper on stone. "Can't let them die. Mary's cattle. Mary." "They're not dying today," Ellie said firmly. "Neither are you. Now stop fighting me and let me help." Something in her tone broke through. Jack's resistance faded. His eyes closed again. "Why?" he whispered. "Because you need it. Don't know me." Ellie wrung out the cloth, replaced it on his forehead. "I know your cattle were screaming. I know you were alone." "That's enough." Jack's hand moved, weak, trembling. It found hers and gripped it with surprising strength. "Thank you." Then he was gone again, pulled under by fever. Ellie sat there for a long moment, his hand still holding hers. She should leave. She should find Doc Brooks. Tell someone what happened, let them handle it from here. Instead, she went back outside and started hauling hay. By the time the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, Ellie had done more physical labor than she'd done in months. The cattle were fed, the horses were watered. She'd found grain stores in the barn and distributed them according to what seemed reasonable. She wasn't a rancher, she was a seamstress, but she'd grown up on a farm before marrying Samuel. Some things you didn't forget. Inside, Jack's fever had stabilized. Not broken, but not climbing higher either. She'd managed to get some water down his throat, a few sips at a time. He'd muttered and thrashed, but hadn't woken properly. Ellie looked at the clock on the mantel. Past 4. She'd missed her delivery. Mrs. Henderson would be furious. Let her be, Ellie thought. The dress could wait. This couldn't. She found blankets in the bedroom closet, made a pallet on the floor near the kitchen where she could watch both Jack and the door. Then she sat down to wait. The photograph on the mantel caught her eye. A young woman, dark-haired, smiling. Pretty in a gentle way. Mary Callahan, obviously. The wife who'd died. "I'm sorry," Ellie said softly to the photograph. "I'm not trying to take anything from you. Just keeping him alive until he can manage on his own." The photograph smiled back, saying nothing. Night fell. Ellie dozed in the chair, jerking awake every time Jack made a sound. Around midnight, his fever spiked. She spent 2 hours cooling his skin with wet cloths, talking to him in low tones, though she doubted he could hear. "You're going to be fine. You're going to get through this. Mary wouldn't want you giving up. You hear me? She wouldn't want that." Sometime before dawn, the fever broke. Jack's thrashing stopped. His breathing evened out. His skin, when she touched his forehead, felt merely warm instead of burning. Ellie slumped back in the chair. Her eyes burned with exhaustion. Her body ached in places she'd forgotten existed. She should go home. She should wash up, change clothes, pretend none of this had happened. The cattle would need feeding at dawn. Ellie closed her eyes. Just for a moment, she told herself. Just a few minutes of rest. She slept. Jack woke to sunlight and confusion. He was in his house, on the floor. A blanket covered him that he didn't remember pulling out. His body felt like it had been trampled by the entire herd. But he was alive. He tried to sit up. The room spun. He grabbed the edge of the table and held on until the world steadied. That's when he saw her. A woman sat slumped in his kitchen chair, chin on her chest, breathing deeply. Her dress was wrinkled and sweat-stained. Her hair had come loose from its pins and hung around her face in dark tangles. Her hands were red and roughened, blistered in places. He knew her. Eleanor Sullivan, the widow who ran the dress shop on Main Street. He'd seen her around town, though they'd never spoken more than passing words. She was younger than him, maybe 35. Pretty in a practical way, with strong features and steady eyes. What in God's name was she doing in his house? Memory came back in fragments. The fever, falling in the yard, the cattle screaming. A voice saying, "They're not dying today, neither are you." She'd saved him. Jack stared at her sleeping form for a long moment. Then he looked out the window toward the barn. The cattle were quiet, fed and watered from the sound of it, or the lack of sound, rather. She'd done that too. Something stirred in Jack's chest, an emotion he hadn't felt in 2 years, something dangerously close to hope. He crushed it immediately. "No," he told himself. "Don't start down that road. You know where it leads." He tried to stand, made it halfway up before his legs buckled. The noise woke her. Ellie's eyes snapped open. She was on her feet in an instant, moving toward him with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. "Easy. Easy. Don't push yourself. I'm fine. You're not fine. You nearly died." Jack let her help him into the chair she'd vacated. He didn't have the strength to argue. "How long?" "You collapsed yesterday morning. It's dawn now, so about 20 hours. She moved to the kitchen pump, filled a cup with water. "Drink this." He drank. The water was the sweetest thing he'd ever tasted. "You stayed all night," he said. "Someone had to. The cattle fed and watered, both times." She crossed her arms. "I'm not a rancher, Mr. Callahan, but I can follow common sense." Jack looked at her properly for the first time. Saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the blisters on her hands, the way she held herself like a woman running on pure willpower. Why, he asked. She gave him the same answer she'd given last night. "Because you needed it. You don't know me. I know your animals were suffering. I know you were alone." She met his eyes squarely. "What else was I supposed to do? Drive past? Most people would. Then most people aren't worth much, are they?" Jack had no response to that. He looked down at his hands, noticed for the first time that someone had wrapped a cool cloth around his wrists, probably to bring down the fever. She'd thought of everything. "Mrs. Sullivan, Ellie is fine." Ellie. He tested the name. "I can't ask you to stay. You're not asking. I'm offering." She picked up a bucket near the door. "The cattle need morning feeding." "I'll do it. You'll rest. When you're strong enough to manage on your own, I'll leave." "That could be days." "Then it's days. People will talk." Ellie paused at the door. Her back was to him, but he saw her shoulders stiffen. "Let them," she said quietly. And then she was gone. By noon, Jack could walk again. Not well, but enough to make it from the chair to the bed without help. Ellie insisted he rest. He tried to argue. She won. "You're more stubborn than my late husband," she told him. And that's saying something. "What happened to him?" Jack asked before he could stop himself. The question hung between them. Ellie's expression flickered something raw and painful crossing her features before she smoothed it away. "Mining accident. 3 years ago. Cave-in at the Silver Strike." She kept her voice level. "He died with 17 other men. They never even found the bodies." "I'm sorry." Ellie shook her head. "Don't be. It was quick, they said. He didn't suffer." She picked up his empty water cup. "That's more than some people get." Jack thought of Mary, the labor that went wrong, the bleeding that wouldn't stop, the hours of watching her fade while he could do nothing but hold her hand. "My wife died in childbirth," he said. It came out rough, unpracticed. He hadn't spoken these words to anyone in 2 years. Her and the baby both. Ellie stopped, set down the cup, turned to look at him. "I'm sorry," she said, "truly. 2 years ago last April. Samuel was 3 years ago in October." They looked at each other. Two broken people recognizing the shape of each other's grief. "Does it get easier?" Jack asked. Ellie considered the question seriously. "Different," she said finally. "Not easier, just different. You learn to carry it instead of being crushed by it." "How, I don't know." She smiled slightly sadly. "You just do. One day, then another. Until one day you realize you're living again instead of just surviving." Jack thought about his past 2 years. The isolation, the silence, the way he'd pushed everyone away convinced that needing nobody meant hurting nobody. He wasn't sure he'd call that living. "You should eat something," Ellie said, changing the subject. "I found some beans and salt pork in your pantry. It's not fancy, but it's food. You don't have to cook for me. I'm cooking for myself. You just happen to be here." She moved toward the kitchen. "Besides, you're too weak to argue effectively. Take advantage of it while it lasts." For the first time in longer than he could remember, Jack Callahan almost smiled. The first visitor came that afternoon. Ellie was in the barn forking hay to the horses when she heard hoofbeats approaching. She set down the pitchfork and walked to the barn door. A woman sat on a fine brown mare, back straight as a poker expression sharp as broken glass. Agnes Crawford, wife of the bank president, unofficial arbiter of Dusty Creek's social order, Mrs. Sullivan. Agnes's voice dripped honey and thorns. "What a surprise to find you here." "Mrs. Crawford." Ellie kept her voice neutral. "What brings you out to the Callahan place? I might ask you the same thing." Agnes's eyes traveled over Ellie's disheveled appearance. The wrinkled dress, the loose hair, the hay stuck to her sleeves. "Several people noticed your wagon parked here overnight." "There's been talk." "I'm sure there has. A young widow spending the night alone with a single man." Agnes smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You must understand how that appears. Mr. Callahan collapsed with fever yesterday." Ellie's voice remained steady. "His cattle were dying of thirst. I did what any decent person would do. Any decent person would have fetched help. Gone to town. Let the men handle it. By the time I reached town and back, his animals would be dead. Possibly him too." Agnes's smile tightened. "I'm only looking out for your reputation, dear. You've worked so hard to rebuild it since Samuel's passing. It would be a shame to see all that effort wasted on misplaced charity." The words hung in the air. Misplaced charity. As if helping a dying man was somehow inappropriate. "I appreciate your concern," Ellie said carefully. "But my conscience is clear." "I'm sure it is." Agnes gathered her reins. "Still, people talk. And talk has consequences. You'd do well to remember that." She turned her horse and rode away, dust rising in her wake. Ellie stood in the barn doorway watching her go. Her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, from anger. Let them talk, she thought. Let them all talk. She picked up the pitchfork and went back to work. That evening, Jack felt strong enough to sit on the porch. Ellie brought him soup. They ate in silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Agnes Crawford came by today, Ellie said finally. Jack's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. What did she want? To warn me about my reputation. His jaw tightened. I'll talk to her. Tell her you were just being neighborly. That won't help. Ellie shrugged. Agnes sees what she wants to see. So does the rest of this town. You should go then. Jack set down his soup. Before it gets worse. I can manage now. No, you can't. Ellie's voice was firm. You can barely walk across the room. Those cattle need feeding twice a day. You have 100 head, and you're alone. She met his eyes. Unless you've got help hidden somewhere I don't know about. Jack said nothing. She was right, and they both knew it. I'll stay until you can manage. Ellie repeated. What people think is their business. What I do is mine. Why? The question burst from him raw and desperate. Why does it matter to you? You don't owe me anything. You don't know me. Ellie was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. When Samuel died, she said I thought I would die too. Not physically, but inside. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped caring about anything at all. Jack listened. He knew this feeling, knew it intimately. Ruth Walker found me. Ellie continued. 3 weeks after the funeral. I hadn't left the house in days, hadn't eaten in longer. She didn't ask permission, just walked in, started cleaning, started cooking. Stayed for a week until I could function again. She took a breath. I tried to thank her, tried to repay her somehow. You know what she told me? She said, "Child, you can't repay mercy backward. You can only pass it forward." Ellie looked at him. That's why I'm here, Mr. Callahan. Because someone helped me once when I couldn't help myself, and now it's my turn to pass it on. Jack stared at her. In the fading light, her face was open, honest, unguarded. No pity in her expression, no judgment, just simple, practical compassion. He'd spent 2 years convincing himself he didn't need anyone. That solitude was safer, that walls were protection. This woman had walked right through those walls without even trying. Call me Jack, he said finally. Ellie smiled. All right, Jack. Now finish your soup. You need your strength. He finished his soup, and for the first time in 2 years, the silence in his house felt less like emptiness and more like peace. The second morning came faster than either of them expected. Ellie woke before dawn, muscles screaming from 2 days of ranch work. She'd slept on the pallet again, refusing Jack's offer of the bedroom. He'd argued. She'd won. You're the sick one, she'd told him. You get the bed. I'm not sick anymore. You're not well either. End of discussion. Now she rose quietly, splashed water on her face, and headed for the barn. The cattle knew her voice already. They turned toward the gate when they heard her coming, patient and trusting in a way they hadn't been 2 days ago. Animals know, her father used to say. They know who feeds them and who forgets them. She was halfway through the morning feeding when she heard footsteps behind her. Jack stood in the barn doorway, steadier than yesterday, but still pale. He'd dressed properly, shirt tucked in, boots on. His jaw was set with stubborn determination. I can help, he said. You should be resting. I've been resting. Jack walked toward her, only slightly unsteady. These are my cattle, my responsibility. Ellie handed him the water bucket. Fine, fill the trough. But if you collapse again, I'm leaving you in the dirt. Fair enough. They worked side by side in silence. Jack moved slowly, conserving energy, but he didn't stop. Ellie watched him from the corner of her eye, ready to catch him if he faltered. He didn't falter. When the feeding was done, they walked back toward the house together. Jack paused at the porch steps, breathing harder than he should have been. Thank you, he said, for letting me help. It's your ranch. That's not what I meant. He looked at her. Thank you for not treating me like I'm broken. Ellie met his eyes. You're not broken, Jack. Just healing. There's a difference. Something shifted in his expression. Something raw and grateful and almost painful to witness. He looked away first. "Coffee," he asked. "Coffee sounds good." They went inside. The morning passed in quiet domesticity. Jack sat at the table while Ellie made coffee and heated leftover beans from the night before. They ate together, talking about nothing important. The weather, the drought, the price of cattle in San Antonio. Normal things, safe things. But underneath the ordinary words, something else was building. An awareness. A tension that had nothing to do with fever or ranch work. Ellie felt it every time their hands accidentally touched. Every time she caught Jack watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. Every time silence fell between them, and neither rushed to fill it. Dangerous, she thought. This is dangerous. She'd been a widow for 3 years. She knew how loneliness worked, how it made you hungry for connection, made you see things that weren't there. She couldn't afford to confuse gratitude with something deeper. Neither could he. "You're thinking loud," Jack said. Ellie startled. "What?" "Whatever's going on in your head. It's loud." He set down his coffee cup. "Want to tell me about it?" "Nothing to tell." Jack studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, accepting the lie. "All right," he said. "But if you change your mind, I'm a good listener. When I bother to listen at all." Despite herself, Ellie smiled. "I'll keep that in mind." The moment passed, but the tension remained simmering beneath the surface like heat before a storm. Around midday, another visitor arrived. This time it was Doc Brooks, his medical bag in hand, concern creasing his weathered face. He'd heard about Jack's collapse from Agnes Crawford, who'd made sure the whole town knew within hours. "Jackson Callahan," Doc said, climbing down from his buggy. "What's this? I hear about you nearly dying in your own yard." "Slight exaggeration," Jack said from the porch. "Mrs. Crawford said you were unconscious for hours, that Mrs. Sullivan found you face down in the dirt." Doc walked up the steps, already reaching for Jack's wrist to check his pulse. "She also said Mrs. Sullivan spent the night here, alone. With you." The accusation hung unspoken in the air. "She saved my life," Jack said flatly. "I don't doubt it." Doc released his wrist, satisfied with the pulse. "But you know how this town works, son. Good intentions don't matter much when tongues start wagging." From inside the house, Ellie heard every word. She stood frozen by the kitchen window, hands gripping the edge of the sink. "Let them wag," Jack said. "Mrs. Sullivan did nothing wrong." "I know that. You know that." Doc lowered his voice, though not low enough to prevent Ellie from hearing. "But Agnes Crawford is already talking about calling a town meeting. Says it's improper for a young widow to be staying out here with you. Says it sets a bad example." "What kind of example?" "The kind that leads to speculation." Doc met Jack's eyes. "I'm not saying I agree with her. I'm saying you need to be aware. This woman helped you when no one else would. The least you can do is protect her reputation while you still can." Silence followed. Ellie's grip on the sink tightened. "How do I do that?" Jack asked finally. "Send her home." Doc's voice was gentle but firm. "Hire a boy from town to help with the cattle, thank her properly, and let her go before Agnes Crawford turns this into a scandal she can't recover from." Ellie closed her eyes. She knew Doc was right. Every rational part of her brain screamed that he was right. She should leave now before the damage was done. Before her reputation, carefully rebuilt over 3 years, crumbled into dust. But when she opened her eyes and looked out the window at Jack's face, something stubborn rose up in her chest. No. She pushed away from the sink and walked to the door. Both men turned as she stepped onto the porch. "I appreciate your concern, Doc," she said calmly. "But I'll decide when I leave." Doc Brooks sighed. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm trying to help you. I know, and I'm grateful. But Jack can't manage this ranch alone. Not yet." She crossed her arms. "When he can, I'll go. Not before. Agnes Crawford won't wait that long. Then Agnes Crawford will have to find something else to occupy her time. Ellie's voice was steady, but her heart pounded. I'm not doing anything wrong. I refuse to be shamed for showing basic human decency. Doc looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Jack, then back at her. You're both as stubborn as mules, he said finally. Fine. Don't say I didn't warn you. He picked up his medical bag and headed for his buggy. At the bottom of the steps, he paused. Jack. He didn't turn around. Your fever was bad. Worse than you probably realize. If she hadn't found you when she did. He shook his head. Just remember that when the town starts talking. He climbed into his buggy and drove away. Silence settled over the porch. You should go, Jack said quietly. He's right. This will only get worse. Ellie turned to face him. Is that what you want? Jack's jaw tightened. What I want doesn't matter. It matters to me. Their eyes met. Held. What do you want? Jack Ellie asked softly. Tell me honestly, do you want me to leave? The question hung between them heavy as summer heat. Jack's hands clenched at his sides. His throat worked. No. He said finally, the word torn from somewhere deep. No. I don't want you to leave. Then I'm staying. Ellie, I'm staying. She stepped closer. Whatever comes, we'll handle it. Together. Jack stared at her. Something in his expression cracked open, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath his stoic exterior. Why, he whispered. Why would you risk everything for a stranger? Because you're not a stranger anymore. The words settled between them like a promise. Jack reached out hesitant and took her hand. His grip was rough with calluses, warm with life. I don't deserve this, he said. Maybe not. Ellie squeezed his hand. But you're getting it anyway. They stood there on the porch, hands joined, watching the dust devil spin across the empty yard. The storm was coming. They both knew it. But for now, this moment, they had each other. The third day brought trouble. Ellie had just finished the morning feeding when 3 wagons rolled up the road. Agnes Crawford sat in the first one, flanked by her husband Richard and 2 other women Ellie recognized from church. A delegation. An ambush dressed in Sunday best. Jack emerged from the house, still moving carefully but steadier than before. He took one look at the approaching wagons and his expression hardened. Stay inside, he told Ellie. No. Ellie, I'm not hiding. She moved to stand beside him. Whatever they have to say, they can say it to both of us. The wagon stopped. Agnes descended first, her smile sharp as a blade. Mr. Callahan. Mrs. Sullivan. She made their names sound like accusations. We've come to express our concern. Your concern was noted yesterday, Jack said. Through Doc Brooks. This is a different matter. Agnes gestured to the women behind her. The ladies' auxiliary has been discussing the situation. We feel it's our Christian duty to intervene. Intervene, how Ellie asked. Agnes turned to her eyes cold, despite the sweet smile. We've arranged for young Billy Carter to take over the ranch work. He'll start tomorrow. That way you can return to town where you belong. I wasn't aware I'd left where I belonged. Don't be coy, dear. Agnes's voice sharpened. You've been here 3 days, sleeping under his roof, working his land. People are drawing conclusions. What conclusions are those? Jack stepped forward, putting himself between Ellie and Agnes. Spell them out, clearly. Agnes hesitated. Her husband shifted uncomfortably in the wagon. We simply feel, Agnes began. No, Jack cut her off. You came to my property. You brought witnesses. You want to make accusations, make them plain. Or leave. The air crackled with tension. One of the women in the back wagon whispered something. Agnes's face flushed. Very well, she said. The town believes Mrs. Sullivan has compromised herself by staying here alone with you. Whether anything improper has occurred is beside the point. The appearance of impropriety is damaging enough. Appearance. Jack's voice was deadly quiet. Mrs. Sullivan found me dying in my own yard. She saved my life. She's kept my ranch running when I couldn't lift a finger to help. And your concern is appearance. Society has rules, Mr. Callahan. Society can go to hell. Agnes gasped. Her husband's face reddened. Now listen here, Richard Crawford started. No, you listen. Jack's voice rose stronger than it had been in days. This woman showed me more Christian charity in 3 days than your ladies' auxiliary has shown in 3 years. She didn't ask what it would cost her. She just helped. He pointed at the wagon. You want to judge someone, judge yourselves. Judge how long it took any of you to check on a neighbor. Judge how quick you were to assume the worst instead of the best. His hand found Ellie's. Mrs. Sullivan stays until I can manage alone. If that offends your delicate sensibilities, you're welcome to pray about it on Sunday. Silence. Agnes Crawford's mouth opened, closed. Her face had gone white with fury. You'll regret this, she said quietly. Maybe. Jack squeezed Ellie's hand. But not as much as I'd regret letting you drive away the only person who gave a damn whether I lived or died. He turned his back on them. Drew Ellie toward the house. The wagon sat motionless for a long moment. Then one by one they turned and rolled back toward town. On the porch, Ellie let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, I did. Jack, they'll make your life miserable now. They'll blacklist you from... I don't care. He turned to face her. His eyes were fierce, blazing with something Ellie couldn't name. I spent 2 years caring what people thought, he said. 2 years hiding in this house, avoiding town, letting them whisper about the crazy widower who couldn't let go of his dead wife. And you know what it got me? What? Nothing. Jack's voice cracked. Nothing but loneliness and fever, and almost dying alone in the dirt. He took both her hands in his. I'm done hiding, Ellie. I'm done letting fear make my choices. Whatever happens next, I'd rather face it standing up than spend another day on my knees. Ellie stared at him. This man who'd been broken by grief, who'd shut himself away from the world, who'd nearly died rather than ask for help. He was still broken, still healing. But he was fighting now. For her, for them. Something shifted in her heart, something that had been locked away for 3 years. Jack, she said softly. I know. He released her hands, stepped back. I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other. I'm not asking for anything. I just... He ran a hand through his hair. I needed you to know. Whatever happens with the town, you're worth it. You're worth all of it. Ellie closed the distance between them. She took his face in her hands, rough calluses against stubbled cheeks. Stop talking, she said, and she kissed him. It wasn't planned. Wasn't proper. Wasn't anything she should be doing with a man she'd known for 3 days. But when his arms came around her, and his mouth moved against hers, and the whole world narrowed to this one impossible moment, Ellie didn't care about should. She cared about finally feeling alive again. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jack stared at her like she'd hung the moon. Well, he said. That was unexpected. Ellie laughed. The sound surprised her. She hadn't laughed. Really laughed in 3 years. Was it unwelcome, she asked? God, no. He pulled her close again. No. Never. They stood on the porch, wrapped in each other, watching the dust settle where the wagons had been. The storm was still coming. Agnes Crawford wouldn't forgive this. The town would talk. Their reputations would suffer. But right now, holding each other under the July sun, none of that mattered. What matters, Ellie thought, is this. Just this. Jack pressed a kiss to her hair. I should warn you, he murmured. I'm not an easy man. I'm not an easy woman. Then we're well matched. He pulled back, looked into her eyes. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Together, she agreed. They went inside. The 4th of July celebration was 3 days away. 3 days to figure out how to face a town that had already condemned them. 3 days to prove that mercy was stronger than judgment. 3 days to show them all what love could look like when it rose from the ashes of grief. Ellie set about making lunch. Jack sat at the table watching her move through his kitchen like she belonged there. Because maybe she did. Maybe this was what fate looked like when it finally got around to being kind. Or maybe it was the calm before the real storm. Either way, they'd find out soon enough. The kiss changed everything. For 2 days, Jack and Ellie moved around each other with a new awareness. Every accidental touch felt deliberate. Every shared glance carried weight. They didn't speak about what had happened on the porch. They didn't need to. But the world outside the ranch didn't care about their silence. On the 5th morning, Tommy Martinez arrived at dawn. The boy was 12, dark-haired and serious-eyed, the son of Jack's former foreman who'd left when the pay ran out. Mr. Callahan. Tommy removed his hat, clutching it against his chest. My pa sent me. Jack set down the water bucket. Sent you for what? To warn you, sir? The boy's voice trembled slightly. There's a meeting tonight at the church. Mrs. Crawford called it. She's saying things about Mrs. Sullivan. Bad things. Ellie appeared in the barn doorway. What kind of things? Tommy's face reddened. He couldn't meet her eyes. Things about you two being together, about how it ain't proper. She's asking Reverend Stone to speak against you at the 4th of July celebration tomorrow. Jack's hands clenched into fists. Is that so? He said quietly. My pa says they're planning to run you out of town, ma'am. Tommy finally looked at Ellie. The ladies' auxiliary. They want to make an example. Show folks what happens when women don't behave. Ellie's face went pale, but her voice stayed steady. Thank you for warning us, Tommy. That was brave. The boy shifted his weight. My pa also says... He hesitated. He says Mr. Callahan was good to us when times were hard. Says we don't forget that. If you need help, we're here. Something flickered in Jack's expression. Gratitude, maybe? Or surprise? Tell your father I appreciate it, Jack said. Tell him I won't forget either. Tommy nodded, replaced his hat, and ran back toward the road where a wagon waited. Silence fell over the barn. A meeting, Ellie said finally. Of course there's a meeting. I'll go. Jack, I'll go, he repeated. This is my fault. My reputation, my choice to let you stay. I'll face them. Ellie stepped closer. We'll go together. No. Jack shook his head firmly. If I go alone, they might listen. If we go together, it'll just confirm everything Agnes has been saying. And if you go alone and they don't listen, then at least you'll still have a chance. Jack's jaw tightened. I won't let them destroy you, Ellie. Not for me. Not for this. Ellie grabbed his arm. Don't you dare. Don't you dare try to protect me by pushing me away. We agreed to face this together. That was before I knew what they were planning. It doesn't matter what they're planning. Ellie's grip tightened. I'm not the same woman I was 3 years ago, Jack. I'm not fragile. I'm not going to break because some bitter old women decide to talk about me. This isn't just talk. They want to run you out of town. Let them try. Jack stared at her. Her eyes blazed with defiance, with fire he hadn't seen before. This wasn't the quiet widow who'd saved his life. This was something fiercer, something unbreakable. You're serious, he said. I've never been more serious about anything. They could make your life hell. They've already tried. Ellie released his arm. When Samuel died, there were whispers. People saying I'd married above my station, saying I didn't deserve what he left me. Some of them wanted me to fail. She lifted her chin. I didn't fail then. I won't fail now. Jack was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and pulled her into his arms. God, he murmured against her hair. Where did you come from? Same place as you. Ellie pressed her face to his chest. From loss. From learning that survival isn't the same as living. They held each other in the barn, surrounded by the soft sounds of horses breathing and cattle shifting. Tonight, Jack said finally. We go together. Together, Ellie agreed. The church was packed. Jack had never seen so many people crammed into one building. Every pew was full. People stood along the walls, crowded into the corners, spilled out the open doors. Word had spread fast. Everyone wanted to see the show. Agnes Crawford stood at the front, dressed in her finest black silk, looking for all the world like a judge about to deliver a verdict. Jack and Ellie entered through the back door. The whispers started immediately. Heads turned. Eyes widened. Someone gasped. Agnes's expression flickered with surprise, then hardened with satisfaction. "Mr. Callahan. Mrs. Sullivan." Her voice carried easily over the murmurs. "How good of you to join us." Jack guided Ellie forward, his hand firm on the small of her back. "Heard there was a meeting about me. Seemed rude not to attend." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Agnes's smile thinned. "This meeting isn't about you, Mr. Callahan. It's about community standards, about protecting the moral fabric of our town. And you think Mrs. Sullivan threatens that fabric? I think what's happening at your ranch threatens it." Agnes turned to address the crowd. 5 days this woman has spent at the Callahan property, alone, unchaperoned, sleeping under his roof. More whispers. Ellie felt judgment pressing in from all sides. "I was helping a sick man," she said clearly. "His cattle were dying. He was dying." Agnes waved a dismissive hand. "Dr. Brooks has already confirmed that Mr. Callahan's fever broke days ago. Yet you remain at his ranch." "Why?" "Because the work isn't done." "What work?" Agnes stepped closer, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that carried to every corner. "Or is work what we're calling it now?" The crowd shifted. Some people looked away embarrassed. Others leaned forward hungry for blood. Jack's hand tightened on Ellie's back. "Careful, Mrs. Crawford," he said quietly. "You're dangerously close to slander. Slander requires lies, Mr. Callahan." Agnes spread her hands. "I'm simply asking questions. Questions the whole town is asking. Then let me answer them." Ellie stepped forward away from Jack's protective hand. She faced Agnes directly, spine straight, voice clear. "I found Mr. Callahan collapsed in his yard. I could have left him there. I didn't. I could have sent for help and gone about my business. I didn't do that either." "Why not?" Agnes pressed. "Because help would have taken too long. Because his animals were suffering. Because doing the right thing isn't always convenient, Mrs. Crawford. Sometimes it costs something." Silence fell. Ruth Walker, the woman who owned the general store, rose from her seat in the back. "If I may speak," she said. Agnes's eyes narrowed. "Of course, Mrs. Walker." Ruth walked slowly to the front, her worn hands folded before her. 60 years had lined her face, but her gaze was sharp as a hawk's. 3 years ago, she said this town watched Samuel Sullivan's widow waste away. We saw her stop eating, stop caring, stop living. Ruth turned to look at the crowd. Most of us did nothing. We whispered about how sad it was. We told ourselves someone else would help. We waited for her to ask. She met Ellie's eyes. She never asked. Too proud, too stubborn. Just like someone else I could name. Jack shifted uncomfortably. "I went to her," Ruth continued. "Not because she asked, because I saw a woman dying of grief and I couldn't walk past. I stayed for a week. I cooked. I cleaned. I forced her to eat when she wanted to fade away." She turned back to Agnes. "Was that improper, Mrs. Crawford? Should someone have called a meeting about me?" "That's different," Agnes said quickly. "You're a woman, an older woman." There was no question of what Ruth interrupted, of something unseemly. She gestured at Ellie. "This woman did exactly what I did. She saw someone suffering and she helped. The only difference is the suffering person was a man." Agnes's face flushed. "You're twisting my words." Am I? Ruth's voice hardened. Or am I just saying what everyone here is thinking, but too polite to admit? You're not worried about propriety, Agnes. You're worried about losing control. About someone doing something good that you didn't organize or approve. The crowd murmured. Some heads nodded. Agnes looked around, sensing she was losing ground. "Reverend Stone," she said sharply, Surely you have something to say about this." The Reverend, who had been sitting quietly in the front pew, rose with obvious reluctance. "I believe," he said carefully, "that we should be slow to judge and quick to extend grace." Agnes's eyes widened. Reverend Mrs. Sullivan's actions may have been unconventional. The Reverend folded his hands. "But I have not seen evidence of sin. I have seen a woman helping her neighbor. That is, I believe, the second greatest commandment." But the appearance, Agnes started. The appearance of kindness. The Reverend allowed himself a small smile. "I pray we are not so far gone that kindness must hide itself for fear of gossip." The crowd stirred. The tide was turning. Agnes Crawford looked around the room, watching her carefully constructed case crumble. Her face went white, then red. "This isn't over," she said tightly. "Tomorrow at the celebration, You'll what?" Jack stepped forward. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "Make another speech. Drag this woman's name through more mud." He looked around the church, meeting eyes holding them. "I've been silent for 2 years," he said. "Hiding in my house, avoiding this town, letting you all think whatever you wanted about the crazy widower who couldn't let go." His voice roughened. "My wife died in my arms, my son with her. I watched them both go, and I couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. So yes, I shut myself away. Yes, I pushed everyone out, because it hurt too much to do anything else." Silence. Absolute silence. "This woman didn't ask for my story," Jack continued. "She didn't need to know my pain. She just showed up when I was face down in the dirt dying. She saved my life. She saved my ranch. She saved me." He turned to look at Ellie. "And I'll be damned if I let anyone punish her for that." Ellie's eyes filled with tears. Jack walked toward her, took her hand. "I love her," he said simply. "I know it's only been 6 days. I know that sounds crazy. But she walked into my life when I'd given up on living, and she showed me what mercy looks like, what grace looks like." He faced the crowd again, Ellie's hand in his. "Tomorrow at the celebration, you can judge us. You can whisper about us. You can turn your backs. That's your choice. But know this. What this woman did isn't shameful. It's the most Christian thing anyone has done for me since Mary died." His voice broke on his wife's name. "So, go ahead and call your meetings, Agnes. Make your speeches. But every word you say against Eleanor Sullivan says more about you than it does about her." He pulled Ellie toward the door. The crowd parted to let them through. No one spoke. No one moved. At the door, Jack paused. 4th of July tomorrow," he said. "Supposed to celebrate freedom, independence, the right to choose our own lives." He looked back at Agnes Crawford, still standing frozen at the front. "Might be worth remembering what that actually means." He and Ellie walked out into the night. Behind them, the church exploded with noise. Voices rising, arguing, taking sides. But Jack and Ellie didn't hear it. They walked to their horses in silence, mounted, and rode home together. The stars burned overhead, countless and uncaring. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring. But tonight, they had this, each other. The truth spoken out loud. It was enough. Ellie didn't sleep that night. She lay on the pallet in Jack's kitchen, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word from the church meeting in her mind. Jack's declaration, Ruth's defense, the shock on Agnes Crawford's face, and underneath it all 3 words that wouldn't stop echoing. "I love her." He'd said it in front of everyone, in front of the whole town. He'd claimed her publicly, consequences be damned. No one had ever done that before. Samuel had loved her in his quiet way. But Samuel had been careful about appearances. Proper. Concerned with what the neighbors might say. Jack Callahan didn't care what anyone said. The realization terrified her. Ellie rose before dawn. She couldn't lie still anymore. She dressed quietly, slipped out to the barn, started the morning feeding by habit. The cattle knew her now. They moved toward her when she approached, trusting, expectant. She'd become part of their world in less than a week. How had everything changed so fast? She was filling the water trough when she heard footsteps behind her. Couldn't sleep either. Jack's voice was rough with exhaustion. No. He moved to stand beside her, watching the cattle drink. I shouldn't have said that, he said quietly. In the church. About... He trailed off. About loving me? Jack winced. I put you on the spot. In front of everyone. I should have talked to you first, asked if... Did you mean it? The question stopped him. He turned to look at her. His eyes were red-rimmed, shadowed with sleeplessness. But underneath the exhaustion, something else burned. Yes, he said, I meant it. Ellie set down the bucket. Then why would I want you to take it back? Jack's breath caught. Ellie stepped closer. I've been lying awake all night, she said, trying to make sense of this, trying to tell myself it's too fast, that we barely know each other, that this kind of thing doesn't happen in real life. She reached up, touched his face. But then I think about watching you almost die in my arms. I think about working beside you every morning. I think about that kiss on the porch and how it felt like coming home after being lost for years. Her voice trembled. I don't know what love is supposed to look like, Jack, but I know that when I imagine tomorrow and next week and next year, you're in every picture. Jack's hands came up to cover hers. Ellie, I love you too, she said. Just in case that wasn't clear. He kissed her then there in the barn, surrounded by cattle and horses, and the first pale light of the 4th of July. It was the kind of kiss that changed things, that sealed promises, that said everything words couldn't quite capture. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jack rested his forehead against hers. What do we do now? He asked. We go to the celebration, Ellie said. We hold our heads high. We let them see that their judgment didn't break us. And if Agnes makes good on her threats, then we face it together. Jack laughed, the sound rough and surprised. You're the bravest woman I've ever met, he said. I'm terrified. That's what brave means. He pulled back, looked into her eyes. Doing it anyway, even when you're scared. Ellie smiled, wise words from a man who nearly died from stubbornness. I prefer determined. She laughed, then really laughed, and the sound rang through the barn like bells. The 4th of July celebration started at noon. They arrived together in Jack's wagon dressed in their best. Ellie wore the blue dress she'd been sewing for herself before all this started. Jack wore a clean shirt and his good hat, the one he saved for church. The town square was packed with people. Bunting hung from every post. Children ran between stalls selling pies and lemonade. A brass band played something patriotic and slightly off-key. And every eye turned to watch them arrive. The whispers started immediately. People pointed. Mothers pulled children closer. Men exchanged glances. Jack helped Ellie down from the wagon, his hand steady, his jaw set. Ready? He asked quietly. No, she admitted. But let's go anyway. They walked into the crowd together. At first, people parted before them like the Red Sea. Nobody spoke. Nobody smiled. The judgment was a physical thing, a wall of cold disapproval. Then Ruth Walker appeared, pushing through the crowd. About time you two showed up, she said loudly, deliberately loud. Come on. I saved you spots near the stage. She took Ellie's arm, guided them both forward. The wall cracked. A few people nodded. A few more stepped aside with expressions that looked almost welcoming. Not everyone, Ellie realized. Not everyone believed Agnes Crawford. They found seats near the wooden platform where the speeches would happen. Ruth sat beside them, a silent guardian. Thank you, Ellie whispered. Don't thank me yet, Ruth murmured back. Agnes is speaking after the mayor. This isn't over. As if summoned by her name, Agnes Crawford swept past them, dressed in red, white, and blue, like a flag made flesh. She didn't look at Jack or Ellie, but she smiled, and the smile said everything. The mayor spoke for 20 minutes about liberty and independence and the great American spirit. Jack didn't hear a word of it. His eyes stayed fixed on Agnes Crawford, watching her prepare her moment like a rattlesnake coiling to strike. Ellie's hand found his under the bench. Her fingers were cold. "Whatever she says," Ellie whispered, "we don't react. We don't give her the satisfaction." Jack nodded, but his jaw was tight enough to crack. The mayor finished to scattered applause. He mopped his forehead with a handkerchief and gestured toward Agnes. "And now Mrs. Crawford has asked to address the community on a matter of civic importance." Agnes rose. She climbed the wooden steps to the platform with the grace of a woman who'd practiced this moment in front of her mirror. "Friends," she began, her voice carrying easily across the crowd. "Neighbors, fellow citizens of Dusty Creek." She paused, letting the silence build. "We gather today to celebrate our nation's independence, our freedom, our values, the principles that make America great." A few people clapped. Agnes smiled, warm and motherly. "But freedom comes with responsibility," she continued. "The freedom to do as we please must be balanced against the good of our community, the welfare of our families, the protection of our children." Jack felt Ellie stiffen beside him. "I speak today not out of malice," Agnes said, her voice dropping to a tone of sorrowful concern, "but out of love. Love for this town. Love for the values we've built together." She turned very deliberately to look at Jack and Ellie. "Some among us have forgotten those values." The crowd shifted, heads turned. Eyes found Jack and Ellie sitting near the front. "For nearly a week," Agnes continued, "a woman of this community has been living at the ranch of a single man, sleeping under his roof, working his land, and when the good people of this town expressed concern, she refused to leave." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I don't claim to know what happens behind closed doors," Agnes said, her voice heavy with implication. "I only know what I see, what we all see. A widow who should know better, a widower who should show more respect, and a scandal that threatens to tear apart the moral fabric of our community." She spread her hands, the picture of reasonable concern. "I ask you today, as your neighbors, as your fellow Christians, is this the example we want to set for our children? Is this the freedom our forefathers fought and died for?" Jack started to rise. Ellie's hand tightened on his arm. "Wait," she breathed. Agnes wasn't finished. "Mrs. Sullivan may have come to this town as a respectable widow," she said. "But her actions this week have shown her true character, a woman who would compromise herself, who would bring shame upon—" "That's enough." The voice came from the back of the crowd, deep, commanding, unexpected. Jack turned and his heart stopped. An old man pushed through the crowd leaning on a wooden cane. His hair was white, his face weathered by 80 years of Texas sun. But his eyes were sharp, and his voice carried the authority of a man who'd seen empires rise and fall. Tom Callahan, Jack's father, the man who'd disowned him after Mary's funeral. "Papa." Jack breathed. The old man didn't look at him. He walked slowly, deliberately toward the platform. The crowd parted before him like water before a stone. Agnes Crawford's expression flickered. Uncertainty. Then recovery. "Mr. Callahan," she said smoothly, "how kind of you to join us, though I'm not sure this concerns." "It concerns me, Tom," Callahan said, "more than it concerns you." He climbed the platform steps one at a time, each step deliberate. Agnes stepped back instinctively. Tom turned to face the crowd. "I'm 82 years old," he said. "I've lived in this territory since before most of you were born. I fought in 2 wars. I buried 3 wives and 4 children. I've seen droughts and floods and plagues and every kind of human foolishness you can imagine." His eyes swept the crowd. "But I ain't never seen a town turn on a woman for showing kindness." Agnes opened her mouth. Tom held up one gnarled hand, and she fell silent. "My son and I haven't spoken in 2 years," Tom continued. "I blamed him for Mary's death. Said things I can't take back. Shut him out when he needed family most." His voice roughened. "I was wrong." Jack couldn't breathe. I heard what happened from young Tommy Martinez, Tom said. How my boy nearly died alone in his own yard. How this woman, a stranger, stopped to help when she could have kept riding. How she worked his ranch day and night while he fought off fever. How she stood by him when this town tried to run her out. He turned to look at Agnes. And now you stand up here calling her shameful, calling her improper, trying to destroy her reputation because she did what any decent Christian ought to do. Agnes's face had gone white. You want to talk about values? Mrs. Crawford, Tom's voice hardened. Let's talk about values. Let's talk about how you foreclosed on the Peterson farm last winter when they couldn't make payments. How your husband charges twice the fair rate for loans and calls it business. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Let's talk about how your own daughter ran off to San Francisco 3 years ago because you made her life so miserable she couldn't breathe. How you tell everyone she's visiting relatives when she hasn't written you in 2 years. Agnes's hand flew to her throat. Her husband, sitting in the front row, looked like he'd been struck. You want to judge this woman? Tom pointed at Ellie. This woman who risked everything to help a stranger. Judge yourself first. See how you measure up. He turned back to the crowd. I came here today to make something right. To tell my son I'm sorry. To thank the woman who saved his life when I wasn't there to do it myself. His voice cracked. I'm an old fool who let pride steal 2 years with his only living child. Don't make my mistake. Don't let gossip and judgment blind you to what's real. Tom stepped down from the platform. The crowd parted again, silent watching. He walked directly to Jack. Father and son faced each other for the first time in 2 years. Jack's eyes burned with unshed tears. Tom's hands trembled on his cane. I'm sorry, son. Tom's voice was barely a whisper. I was wrong. About everything. Jack's throat closed. He couldn't speak. Tom turned to Ellie. You saved my boy, he said. I don't know how to thank you for that. Ellie blinked back her own tears. You just did. Tom reached out, took her hand in his weathered grip. Welcome to the family, he said, such as it is. On the platform, Agnes Crawford stood frozen. The crowd had turned away from her attention, fixed on the scene below. Her carefully constructed moment had crumbled to dust. Richard Crawford rose from his seat, face red with humiliation. Agnes, he said tightly. We're leaving. Richard. I now. He took his wife's arm and pulled her down from the platform. They pushed through the crowd toward their buggy, not looking back. Nobody tried to stop them. The silence stretched. Then Ruth Walker started to clap. One person at first, then another, then a dozen, then 100, until the whole square rang with applause. Not for Agnes Crawford and her righteous judgment. For Tom Callahan and his humble apology. For Ellie Sullivan and her stubborn courage. For the messy, complicated truth of human beings trying to do right by each other. Jack finally found his voice. Papa, he said roughly. I thought you hated me. Tom shook his head. Never hated you, son. Hated myself for not being able to save Mary. Took it out on you because I couldn't face my own failure. You weren't there. It wasn't your fault. Wasn't yours either. Tom's eyes were wet. But I made you carry that weight alone. 2 years you've been drowning, and I couldn't see past my own grief to throw you a rope. His hand found Jack's shoulder. This woman threw you a rope, Tom said. Don't let her go. Jack looked at Ellie. She stood beside him, tears streaming down her face, surrounded by a town that had finally stopped judging and started seeing. I don't intend to, Jack said. He reached into his pocket. Ellie's breath caught. This was Mary's, Jack said. He held up a simple gold ring. She'd want you to have it. Jack, I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. I know we've only known each other a week. He took her hand. But my father just taught me something. Life's too short for pride. Too short for waiting. Too short for worrying about what people might say. He dropped to one knee. The crowd went absolutely silent. Eleanor Sullivan. Jack said, his voice rough with emotion. Will you marry me? Ellie stared at him, at the ring, at Tom Callahan nodding encouragement, at Ruth Walker beaming like the sun, at the whole town of Dusty Creek watching and waiting. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes." Jack slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. He rose, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her in front of God and everyone. The crowd erupted. Cheers and whistles and stamping feet. The brass band struck up a wedding march, slightly off-key but enthusiastic. Children threw handfuls of grain, like it was rice. In the chaos, Tommy Martinez appeared at Jack's elbow. "Mr. Callahan." The boy was grinning ear to ear. "My pa says he's real glad you're not dead." Jack laughed, the sound strange and wonderful after 2 years of silence. "Tell him I'm real glad too, and tell him he's got a job if he wants it," Ellie added. "The ranch is going to need more hands." Tommy's eyes widened. "Yes, ma'am." He ran off to deliver the news. Ruth Walker pushed through the crowd, grabbed Ellie in a fierce hug. "Didn't I tell you," Ruth said. "Didn't I tell you mercy always comes back around?" "You told me," Ellie admitted. "I should have believed you sooner." The afternoon dissolved into celebration. Someone produced a fiddle. Someone else rolled out barrels of cider. The 4th of July feast became an impromptu engagement party. Jack and Ellie found themselves surrounded by well-wishers. People who'd whispered about them days ago now pumped Jack's hand and kissed Ellie's cheek. The shift was dizzying. "Hypocrites," Ellie muttered to Jack during a brief moment alone. "Half of them wanted to run me out yesterday." "Maybe," Jack said. "But people can change." "Isn't that the whole point?" Ellie considered this. "I suppose so. Besides," Jack pulled her close, "if we don't forgive them, we're no better than Agnes Crawford." She laughed, despite herself. "When did you get so wise? About 10 minutes ago. I'm still catching up." Tom Callahan approached them as the sun began to sink. "I need to get back," he said. "My old bones don't do well past dark." "Stay," Jack said. "The ranch has room." Tom shook his head. "Not tonight. Tonight belongs to you two." "But tomorrow—" "Tomorrow you come for breakfast," Ellie said firmly. "We have 2 years to make up for." Tom's eyes glistened. "I'd like that." He embraced his son one more time. Then, surprising everyone including himself, he embraced Ellie too. "Thank you," he whispered, "for saving him. For saving all of us." He walked slowly toward his buggy cane, tapping against the hard-packed earth. Jack watched him go. 2 years, he said quietly. 2 years I thought he hated me, and all along he was just as broken as I was. Ellie took his hand. "We're all broken, Jack. The lucky ones find someone who helps put the pieces back together." "Is that what you're doing? Putting me back together?" She smiled up at him. "Someone has to. You were in pretty bad shape when I found you." Face down in the dirt, he agreed. "Not my finest moment. I don't know." She squeezed his hand. "It was the moment I found you. That makes it pretty fine in my book." The celebration continued around them, but Jack and Ellie stood still in the center of it all. Two people who'd been broken by loss, brought together by chance, and now facing a future neither of them had expected. "We should probably go home," Jack said eventually. "The cattle won't feed themselves." "Home," Ellie tested the word. "I like the sound of that. Get used to it." Jack helped her into the wagon. "Because you're stuck with me now. Legal and binding soon as we can find a preacher." "Reverend Stone is right over there," Ellie pointed out, looking very pleased with himself. "Tomorrow," Jack said. "Tonight I just want to sit on my porch with my future wife and watch the stars come out." "Our porch," Ellie corrected. Jack grinned. "Our porch." They drove home through gathering dusk, leaving the celebration behind. The sound of fiddles and laughter faded as they climbed the rise toward the ranch. The cattle lowed contentedly in their pasture. The horses nickered greeting from the barn. Home, Jack thought. It finally feels like home again. He helped Ellie down from the wagon. They walked to the porch together, hand in hand. 1 week ago, Ellie said softly, I was delivering a dress to the Henderson Ranch. Just another ordinary day. And I was dying in my own yard. If I'd kept driving that morning—" She shuddered. "I almost did, you know. I almost decided it wasn't my business. But you didn't." "No." She looked up at him. "Something stopped me. Something told me to turn around." "Fate," Jack said. "Mercy," Ellie countered. "The kind that passes forward." He pulled her close. "Whatever it was," he murmured against her hair, "I'm grateful. So am I." They stood there on the porch as darkness fell, wrapped in each other, watching the first stars appear. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. A wedding to plan, a ranch to run, a relationship with Tom Callahan to rebuild, a town to navigate now that everything had changed. But tonight, there was only this. Two broken people made whole by unexpected grace. A future stretching out before them, uncertain, but no longer empty. And the simple, profound gift of not being alone anymore. Inside the house, Mary's photograph still sat on the mantel. But it no longer felt like a reproach. It felt like a blessing. "Go live," Jack imagined her saying. "Love again. I'll wait for you on the other side." He would. He finally could. "Thank you," he whispered to the night, "for sending her to me." The stars had no answer. But Ellie, warm in his arms, was answer enough. Jack Callahan had spent 2 years dying by inches. Tonight, at last, he was ready to live. The wedding was set for Sunday. 5 days felt like forever, and no time at all. Jack spent every waking hour preparing the ranch, fixing things he'd let fall apart during 2 years of grief. The porch railing, the barn door hinges, the garden Mary had planted and he'd let die. Ellie watched him work with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You're going to collapse again," she said on the 3rd morning. "You just recovered from fever." "I'm fine. You said that last time, right before you face-planted in the dirt." Jack set down his hammer. "That was different. How I didn't have anything to live for then." The words hung between them. Ellie's throat tightened. "Jack," she said softly. He crossed to her, took her hands in his calloused grip. "I mean it," he said. "Before you came, I was just waiting to die. Going through motions, feeding cattle because they needed feeding, not because I cared." He lifted her hands to his lips. "You gave me a reason to care again." Ellie blinked back tears. "You're going to make me cry before my own wedding." "Good." Jack grinned. "Then we'll match." She laughed despite herself. "Fool. You're fool." He kissed her forehead. "Now let me finish this railing before your future father-in-law arrives." Tom Callahan had come every day since the 4th of July. He'd sit on the porch watching Jack work, offering occasional advice in his gruff way. The relationship was still fragile, still tentative. 2 years of silence couldn't be erased in a week. But they were trying. That was what mattered. "He really does love you," Tom said to Ellie that afternoon while Jack was in the barn. "I've never seen him like this. Not even with Mary." Ellie looked at the old man sharply. "You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it to make you feel better." Tom's eyes were steady. Mary was sweet, kind, good for him in her quiet way. But she never challenged him, never pushed back. "And I do." "Lord, yes." Tom almost smiled. "You've got steel in your spine, girl. Jack needs that. He's too stubborn to manage on his own." Ellie considered this. "He managed for 2 years." "Did he?" Tom shook his head. "He survived. That's not the same thing." She turned him to look at her. "He needs someone who'll stand toe-to-toe with him, who won't let him hide." "You're that person." "What if I'm not enough?" The fear slipped out before she could stop it. The fear she'd been carrying since that first morning when she'd found Jack face down in the dust. Tom reached over, patted her hand. "You're enough," he said. "Trust me. I've been wrong about many things, but I know my son. He chose well." The wedding guests began arriving Saturday evening. Ellie had expected a small ceremony. Just Jack herself, Tom Ruth Walker, and Reverend Stone. Maybe Doc Brooks and his wife. She was wrong. Wagons rolled up the ranch road one after another. Families from town, ranchers from neighboring spreads. People she barely knew, and people she'd never met. "What is this?" she asked Jack, watching the procession with growing alarm. "I don't know." His expression was as stunned as hers. "I didn't invite them." Ruth Walker appeared at her elbow, beaming. "Word spreads fast in small towns," Ruth said, "especially when the word is good news. But there must be 30 people here, 47 at last count." Ruth patted her arm. "The whole town wants to see this, dear. You gave them something to believe in again." Ellie didn't know what to say to that. The guests spread out across the ranch property, setting up tables and chairs they'd brought with them. Women produced covered dishes and pies. Men rolled out barrels of cider. Children ran between the legs of adults, shrieking with joy. It looked like the 4th of July celebration had moved to the Callahan ranch. In the middle of it all, Agnes Crawford's buggy appeared on the road. Ellie's stomach dropped. Jack moved to stand beside her, his hand finding hers automatically. "What's she doing here?" Ellie breathed. "I don't know." Jack's jaw tightened. "But if she causes trouble—" "Wait." The buggy stopped. Agnes descended slowly without her usual flourish. She wore a simple gray dress instead of her customary finery. Her face looked older than it had a week ago. Tired. Richard Crawford remained in the buggy, staring straight ahead. Agnes walked toward Jack and Ellie. The crowd parted, watching, waiting. "Mr. Callahan." Her voice was quieter than Ellie had ever heard it. "Mrs. Sullivan. Mrs. Crawford." Jack's tone was carefully neutral. "We weren't expecting you." Agnes's hands twisted together. "I came to apologize," she said. Ellie blinked. "What?" "I came to apologize." Agnes repeated. "For what I said. For what I did. For—" She took a shaky breath. "For being a bitter, jealous old woman who tried to destroy something good because I couldn't stand to see others happy." The silence was deafening. Tom Callahan spoke up. "What brought this on, Agnes?" "Last week, you were ready to run Eleanor out of town on a rail." Agnes flinched at the words. "My daughter wrote me," she said quietly. "First letter in 3 years. She'd heard what happened at the celebration. Heard what you said about her Mr. Callahan." Her eyes glistened. "She said she was ashamed of me. Said I'd become exactly the kind of woman I always claimed to despise. The kind who tears others down instead of lifting them up." She looked at Ellie directly. She was right. Agnes's voice cracked. "I've been so angry for so long. Angry at my daughter for leaving. Angry at myself for driving her away. Angry at anyone who seemed to have what I'd lost." She gestured at Ellie and Jack. "You two found each other despite everything, despite loss and grief, and the whole town trying to keep you apart. And instead of being glad for you, I tried to destroy it." Her hands dropped to her sides. "I'm sorry. I know it's not enough. I know I can't take back what I did. But I needed you to know that I was wrong." Ellie stared at the woman who'd tried to ruin her life a week ago. The woman who'd called meetings and spread rumors and made her feel like dirt. The woman who was now standing before her, stripped of pride, asking for forgiveness. "Mercy can't be repaid backward," Ruth had told her once. "It can only be passed forward." Ellie stepped toward Agnes. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me." Agnes looked up, surprise flickering across her face. You're not going to tell me to leave?" "Should I?" Agnes considered this. "Probably. I would in your place." "Maybe." Ellie reached out, took Agnes's cold hand in hers. "But I'm not you." She glanced at Jack, then at the crowd watching in stunned silence. "Stay for the wedding," Ellie said. "If you want to." Agnes's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve that." "No," Ellie agreed. "But mercy isn't about deserving. It's about choosing to be kind when you don't have to be." She squeezed Agnes's hand. "Someone taught me that recently." Agnes nodded, unable to speak. She retreated to the edge of the crowd, where her husband waited with an expression of bewildered relief. Jack pulled Ellie close. "You didn't have to do that," he murmured. "Yes, I did." Ellie leaned into him. "Otherwise, I'd be no better than she was. You could never be like her. Everyone has the capacity for bitterness, Jack. The question is whether we feed it or starve it." Jack looked at her with something like wonder. "How did I get so lucky?" he asked. "You collapsed in your own yard and I happened to be passing by." Ellie smiled. "Luck had nothing to do with it." The wedding took place at sunset. Reverend Stone stood on the porch, Bible in hand. Jack waited beside him, wearing his best suit, hands trembling slightly at his sides. Tom Callahan stood behind him as witness. Ellie walked across the yard alone. She'd considered asking Ruth to give her away, but in the end, she wanted to walk this path herself. She'd spent 3 years learning to stand on her own feet. This final journey she would make under her own power. The crowd parted before her. Faces smiled. Some wept. When she reached the porch steps, Jack extended his hand. She took it. They turned to face Reverend Stone together. The ceremony was simple. Traditional words spoken with new meaning. Promises made before God and 47 witnesses. Rings exchanged with trembling fingers. "Do you, Jackson Thomas Callahan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do." Jack's voice was rough with emotion. "I do." "And do you, Eleanor Grace Sullivan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Ellie looked at Jack. At the man she'd found dying in the dust 8 days ago. The man who'd pushed everyone away after losing his wife. The man who'd stood up in front of the whole town and declared his love for her when it would have been easier to stay silent. "I do," she said. "With all my heart, I do." Then, by the power vested in me by God in the state of Texas, Reverend Stone pronounced, "I declare you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." He smiled. "Jack, you may kiss your bride." Jack pulled her close and kissed her like the world was ending, like the world was beginning, like she was the only thing in the universe that mattered. The crowd erupted, cheers and whistles and joyful tears. Tommy Martinez threw his hat in the air. Ruth Walker dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Tom Callahan stood straighter than he had in years, pride radiating from every line of his weathered face. Even Agnes Crawford was clapping, tears streaming down her face. When Jack finally released her, Ellie was laughing and crying at the same time. "That was quite a kiss," she managed. "Been saving it up," Jack said. 2 years of not feeling anything. Had to make up for lost time. The reception lasted until well past midnight. Tables groaned with food. Fiddles played until the strings nearly snapped. Children fell asleep under wagons, while their parents danced and laughed. Jack and Ellie moved through it all like figures in a dream, accepting congratulations, receiving gifts, watching their community come together in celebration of their joy. At one point, Doc Brooks pulled Jack aside. "I owe you an apology," Doc said. "I told you to send her away. Said it was the proper thing to do. You were trying to protect her reputation. I was being a coward." Doc shook his head. "I knew Agnes Crawford was wrong, but I was too scared to say so. You stood up when I wouldn't." Jack clapped him on the shoulder. "We all get scared sometimes. The question is whether we let it stop us." "She's good for you," Doc said, glancing at Ellie across the yard. "Don't let her go. Not a chance." Near midnight, the last guests finally departed. The Martinez family stayed to help clean up Tommy's father, working alongside his son with quiet efficiency. "I meant what I said," Ellie told Mr. Martinez. "About the job. We need good hands, and Jack says you're the best he ever had." Mr. Martinez ducked his head, embarrassed by the praise. "Mrs. Callahan, I left when things got hard. I'm not sure I deserve everyone's allowed a second chance, Ellie interrupted. That's what this whole week has been about. The man looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Monday morning, he said. We'll be here at dawn. We'll be waiting. Finally, blessedly, they were alone. Jack and Ellie stood on the porch of their home, listening to the silence settle. The cattle lowed contentedly in the pasture. The horses breathed softly in the barn. A breeze carried the smell of summer grass. Mrs. Callahan, Jack said, testing the name. Ellie smiled. Mr. Callahan. Has a nice ring to it. It does. She leaned against him. Though I'll probably still think of myself as Ellie Sullivan sometimes. You can be whoever you want to be. Jack wrapped his arm around her. As long as you're mine. Always. They stood there for a long while, watching the stars wheel overhead. You know, Ellie said eventually, 1 week ago, today I was just passing through. Just running an errand. If I'd left 5 minutes earlier or taken a different road. You didn't, Jack said. But I almost did. Almost doesn't count. He turned her to face him. You stopped. You helped. You saved my life and my ranch and my soul. That's a lot of credit for one small choice. Small choices are how lives get built. Jack's voice was soft. One day at a time. One decision at a time. One act of mercy at a time. Ruth Walker's words. Ellie said. You've been listening. Hard not to. Jack grinned. She talks loud. Ellie laughed. She does. The breeze picked up, carrying the scent of rain from somewhere far away. The drought would break soon. The land would heal. Life would go on. Jack pulled Ellie closer. Thank you, he said, for not keeping driving that morning, for seeing a stranger in trouble and choosing to help, for staying when everyone told you to go. Thank you for letting me stay. Ellie pressed her face to his chest. For choosing to live again, for choosing me. They held each other in the darkness. Somewhere in town, Agnes Crawford was writing a letter to her daughter, the first step on a long road of reconciliation. Somewhere on the road north, Mr. Martinez was telling his wife about his new job, about second chances, about employers who saw value in broken men. Somewhere in his small house at the edge of town, Tom Callahan was looking at a photograph of his dead wife, telling her about the daughter-in-law she never got to meet, promising to do better with the family he had left. And here on this porch, in this moment, two broken people stood whole together. Ellie lifted her head, looked into Jack's eyes. Take me inside, she said. I want to start our life together. Jack smiled, the kind of smile she'd never seen on him before. Open, unguarded, full of hope. Yes, ma'am, he said. He swept her up in his arms and carried her across the threshold. Behind them, the night stretched peaceful and infinite. Before them, a future neither had expected. And in between, the simple, profound truth that mercy always finds its way home. 1 year later, Ellie stood on the same porch, watching the sunset over a land transformed by rain. The drought had broken that first autumn, turning the brown prairie green again. The cattle were fat. The horses were sleek. The garden Mary had planted bloomed under Ellie's care. In her arms, she held a blanket-wrapped bundle. 3 weeks old, eyes like Jack's, hair like hers. A daughter. They'd named her Grace. Jack emerged from the barn, saw them waiting, and his whole face changed. He jogged across the yard, still moving carefully around his healed body, and gathered them both in his arms. How's my girl? He asked. Which one? Ellie smiled. Both. Jack kissed Ellie's forehead, then touched their daughter's tiny hand. Both of my girls. We're fine. We were just watching the sunset. Jack turned to look at the horizon, at the colors painting the sky. 1 year, he said quietly. 1 year ago, today, you found me dying in the dirt. And now look at us. Look at us. He pulled her closer, the baby nestled between them. A family. A future. Everything I thought I'd never have again. Everything we thought we'd never have again, Ellie corrected. Jack nodded. Everything we thought we'd never have again. From the road, a wagon approached. Tom Callahan coming for his evening visit. He came every day now, had for months. The old man and his son had rebuilt something precious from the ashes of their grief. Behind him, another wagon. Ruth Walker bringing dinner because that's what Ruth did. And behind her, the Martinez family. Tommy running ahead, eager to see the baby. Family, Ellie thought. Not just the one you're born to, but the one you build. The one you choose. The one you earn through mercy and forgiveness and love. Jack squeezed her hand. No regrets, he asked. Ellie looked at their daughter, at the approaching wagons, at the home they'd made from ruins. Not one, she said, not a single one. Grace stirred in her blanket, made a small sound and settled again. The sun slipped below the horizon, and Eleanor Callahan, who had once been lost, stood surrounded by love in a home she had earned with her own 2 hands. Mercy had brought her here. Love had made her stay. And nothing, not time or trouble or the judgments of small-minded people, would ever take this away. Jack Callahan had learned finally that strength wasn't about standing alone. It was about letting people help when help was needed. About accepting grace when it was offered. About passing forward the mercy you'd received. Ellie had taught him that. Their daughter would carry it on. The wagons arrived. Voices filled the evening air. Laughter and chatter and the sounds of people who loved each other. Jack looked at his wife, his child, his family gathered on his land. I love you, he said simply. I love you too, Ellie replied. Always have. Always will. They walked together toward their family, their future, their life. Behind them, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Before them tomorrow waited full of promise, and in their hearts the certainty that mercy once given never truly ends, it only grows.